Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk TV. Lively talk about life, church, and church life. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill Tenney-Britton, and I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Dr. Kris Tenney-Britton, and we're broadcasting from our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of America. Say good morning, Kris.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Church Talk TV.
Kris and Bill Tenney-Britton here today to talk to you about why numbers are your church's best friends, or at least a pretty good friend.
Numbers! We never want to talk about that, do we? We flesh numbers, we don't know numbers. We may know numbers all around our house, how many eggs we have left, how much money we have in the bank, but when it comes to the church, we don't want to talk numbers.
Well, I mean, let's be honest.
Yep.
You know, the Effective Church Group has been accused many times.
Oh, yes.
All you care about is the numbers.
Decades
and you know, here's the deal. That's not true, but it is absolutely true.
Yes.
Because every one of those numbers are numbers that can be used to determine or help determine the health of a church.
Yes.
Are we doing what we need to do? Yes. Now, you know, there is a sense in which there's a whole lot of folks counting just these numbers, and the only numbers that count, and my numbers are bigger than your numbers, and you know, and yeah, okay, they could be bragging rights, but
and we're going to talk about how to count, what is important and what to count, and I've got some thoughts on how to count them.
Okay. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna jump into this, but I want to start off by saying this: is that, you know, we do get a lot of pushback about numbers.
Yeah, we do.
And there's, just to be totally honest, those who are pushing back the hardest are almost always the churches that are in decline.
Right.
Because they don't want to actually, you know, well, we're faithful. Well, we're faithfully getting smaller and smaller. So we're faithful in what? We're faithful in the handful that shows up and listens to your preaching or whatever, but we continue to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And we say, so how many Baptists? Oh, we don't count.
Yeah.
You know, what's the repentance? We don't count. Well, you know.
Or we count, but Lord have mercy. How many years ago was that, right?
The New Testament counted.
Right. Yeah, you know, this is important. Go.
Yeah. The bottom line is, folks, is that when you look in the New Testament, the apostles, the guys who wrote the New Testament, they counted. They knew that Jesus fasted for 40 days.
Yep.
They knew he died and resurrected in 3 days.
Yes.
They knew, you know, there were 12 apostles.
Right.
They fed 5,000 one time. They fed 4,000 the next time. They had 12 baskets of leftovers. They started with 2 fish and 3 loaves or whatever. And here's the one that I just love is they knew how many fish that Peter and the boys caught with that miraculous. There were 153 fish in that.
100, right?
Not around 150.
I know.
Over 100.
That's right.
153 fish they counted. Why did they count?
Well, heck, we have a whole book called Numbers.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is counting, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So I mean, the question is, why do they count? Why do we count? Well, I think it starts with the same thing for both of them. In the New Testament, there were the numbers of, 3,000 came to Jesus and were baptized, and later on there was 5,000. There were 120 in the prayer room that on the day of Pentecost and so on. So they were counting those. But what about all those other numbers? And that is, there's some divine significance for numbers. There's some divine significance for counting. In the Gospels, the bottom line is the 153 fish, the 2 drachma that were in the fish's mouth, and the number of people who were fed and what. They were all pointing to Jesus and saying, Jesus is the Son of God. He's doing these signs. I think about the 6 water pots that were filled with wine, and we know that they had between
6. We know how many,
exactly,
right?
And we know that they had about 20 gallons of wine and whatnot. So 120 gallons of wine. They counted because it pointed to Jesus' divinity. It pointed to the work that Jesus was doing. And so when the New Testament, when the early church picks up and they start doing the counting, there is a sense in which this is what the Holy Spirit's doing.
Yeah.
Peter Wagner
Yeah.
wrote a book, The Acts of the Holy Spirit.
I love it.
And that book is a commentary on the Acts of the Apostles, which is normally what we call it. And he said that's a lousy name because it really is about what the Holy Spirit is doing in the church in this book.
In the today.
Yeah, right. And that goes into today.
Right.
When we start looking at numbers, it really is, we talk about it all the time. I get it pushed all that. I say, you need to grow your church. Well, it's not your church, it's God's church. And if you just be faithful, that God will grow the church. There's a sense in which that's actually true. On the flip side of that is God doesn't tend to work in a vacuum. He works through the hands and the feet and the mouths of those that he's called and raised up to go ye therefore and make disciples. Not y'all come, but y'all get out there and, okay, so I'm getting
You're
on to...
really on a massive over there tangent, so let's keep on going there.
But it is about the hearts that God is preparing, the hearts that the Spirit is preparing that bring into the church that, again, why 120 people in the prayer room when the acts of the Holy Spirit came on Pentecost? Because that was important. Because it showed what God was able to do with a handful, from 12 to 120 to 3,000, and away we go. So it really is, there's some divine significance to these numbers. And so that's the first reason for counting.
All right. I love this. Okay, anyways, we have to count. In the modern church, in today's church, we have to count. This is, there's an accountability part of that. How are we doing? What are we doing? There is, and it's bigger than we are.
If you don't count it, you can't measure it to see whether it's successful
That's
or not.
Right. Well, and some people do push back about success. What is success? But are your efforts working?
Right.
I mean, right? I mean, that's really...
Is there a return on your investment of time and energy?
That's right. So what do you measure? Well, historically, what we were taught, way back when, we measure butts in... There are 3 B's. Butts in seats, bucks, as in how many bucks are those butts bringing, and buildings. Now, I want to say this. We've got the 3, but I have records. Our library is still in over 100 cases of books in our library. They still have not been unpacked. It's such a chore, we're dreading it. Anyways, and we have a disagreement as to how to do that. Yes, let's talk church, right? Okay, so in there somewhere is this journal, a record that was kept, about 100 years ago now. I can't believe it. And nearly 100 years ago, of churches that were in Missouri, disciples, they were then Christian churches, disciples churches. And they would meet on a quarterly basis, these churches, and the secretary hand wrote in this little book the reports from each church. And many of them were like house churches. They were very small overall. But Brother Anderson came forward and he reported that they have 4 new families coming and that they had 3 baptisms. And then there would be the next person. And so on it would go, that they were always reporting on the number of people that were coming and on baptisms.
And new people. Not just number of people and
That's
new
right.
people.
New people
There was an
and the
expectation
baptisms. Yes.
that they were reaching out, bringing in new people and baptizing new people.
Right. Well, and there is an accountability. I said accounting, but there's a celebration about that. I mean, as you're talking about the biblical numbers and bringing people in, and look what Jesus can do. I mean, that really is, look what Jesus can do. That's 153.
And then look at what the church can do, what the followers of Jesus can do. Right. Jesus sent out the 70. And they came back in celebration and said, even the demons were subject to us. And Jesus is going, yeah, man, hey, awesome. Way to go. It was celebration time.
Yes, indeed. So there are a number of metrics that we do need to keep track of. We do need to keep track of attendance, right? We talk in terms of average worship attendance. And I like to look at that or average worship attendance is, all you have to do is divide by 4, right? A month has, say, 4 Sundays. On 4 Sunday months, you total them up and you divide them by 4. That's your average worship attendance.
But the key there is you count every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
And I get a lot of people say, well, what do we count? the way I count is every living soul in the building.
In the building,
do you count the kids?
nursery.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you count them. They count.
Do you have 2 services? Yeah. Do you have a Wednesday evening service or a Tuesday or
but
whatever?
you don't commingle that with the Sunday.
Oh, see, I do. If it's a worship service, if you've got a midweek worship service,
If you
then I'm gonna
here's
count
my
it
here's
in.
my pushback.
Yeah.
If you don't divide them out,
yeah.
then you don't know how well your Wednesday service is doing. If you
Right, I
commingle
catch
the
you
numbers.
there. So are we talking? So what we're talking is you've got 2 worship services. Then you've got your average worship attendance for Sunday and your average worship attendance for Wednesday.
Well, same goes though if you have 2 services on Sunday.
Well, I agree, or a
If you don't,
Saturday.
all of these get divided up, and yes, you can combine them for your average
you have
worship.
to. Well, okay. So I agree with you totally that you keep separate track, or you have to keep track of each of your services, however many you have. But to say this is how many people we have worshiping
Right.
each week, then you do that combined.
Right, no argument there.
That
No argument there.
combined,
But I
right?
just want to make sure that we
Yeah.
understand you track
Yeah.
everything separate, so you know
Everything.
whether maybe the first service is starting to lose numbers, and the second
Right.
is getting, you need to know those numbers.
Right.
And because you can look at the why. Is there a why,
Right,
or is it just
exactly.
because it was too cold at 7 a.m. and
Right,
et cetera?
yeah, for sure. And we do need to track offerings. And
Absolutely.
And the key, right, a key about offerings, one, it tells you what kind of monies you're looking at, but even more than that, is your money up? Is your money down? Those can tell you something.
What's your
They're
per
really
capita
something.
giving?
What's your per capita giving? Definitely. And what I find is offering an increased offering per capita, it's got to be per capita, really is a marker of spiritual growth.
Right.
Right. So as people grow spiritually, that often their gifting.
The expectation is that the gift increases.
Exactly.
Right.
I remember one evening before Thanksgiving, a woman, pretty new member, called me, and she had started a new job, and she was just really grateful for what the Lord was doing for her. And she said, she apologized profusely for interrupting us the night before Thanksgiving, and said, I just needed to tell you that I have made the decision to tithe. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like in totality, but I am so grateful for what God is doing for me, and I just really want to serve Him, and I want to please Him, so I'm going to do my best to tithe. And it was like, praise God. And on top of that, I had baptized her a couple of years earlier. So, I mean, spiritual growth, tracking our incomes.
Right.
Right?
And just a real quick note
side.
about per capita giving.
Yeah.
You can't compare your church's per capita giving with any other church.
Right.
It is an in-house number because the economic circumstances, the makeup, the demographics of your congregation, are they older on fixed income? Are they younger and making a fortune in real estate market or something? That changes from church to church.
Right.
So you track that number just so you can, from year to year, to see where we are as a congregation, but you can't compare it to other churches.
Right.
We know what the national average is, and that's kind of it really there's that number out there, but it's not all that helpful.
Sure. Okay, so can we keep
Yeah.
going?
There's a whole lot of other numbers that are really, really important.
Go for it.
And just real quick, I want to point out that there's a download right there in the description of the
yes.
show for the numbers you need, which will walk you through the numbers that you need. But let's talk about some of those.
Just
Number
toss
one,
them
in
out.
my personal opinion,
Yeah.
is baptisms.
Right.
And really, it's conversion baptisms, not
Yes.
biological baptism.
Right.
It's great, and don't give me those count too, okay?
Right.
But the number you want to be looking at is how many people who were adults or teenagers, not in the family of your congregation, that have become Christians, who have made a decision to follow Jesus,
Right.
and went forward for baptism. Conversion baptisms are incredibly important because it gives you a marker of how well we are doing reaching out evangelistically into our community.
Right. Okay. And so some of you out there know that now a number of years ago, I was involved in a mainline evangelism study and consulted on it. And what we looked at were several major, the mainline denominations. And we were trying to track per capita baptisms, you might call it.
Right.
So how many baptisms were
Per
churches
members,
having?
I call it the ratio. It's
Right.
the baptism ratio.
Okay.
Number of baptisms per year to
Right.
your average worship attendance.
Right.
That gives you your ratio.
So we were working, and we had a particular ratio, and churches needed to have such a percentage every year over 3 years. So we wanted to every year
to be included in the study.
That's right, to be included in our study. So we wanted you to be doing baptisms every year at this number. And we really had to screen for churches that practice believers' baptism, and so youth baptisms, because those numbers, this is the way we knew those churches. Every other year you'd get a large number, because it's when the pastor, usually they do pastors' classes every 2 years, and so they're going there. It was really hard to find those churches. And that's a whole other conversation about what they were doing.
Evangelism.
Well, I won't say they specialized, but they were doing it right. They were doing it right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we're looking at first-time visitors, returning visitors. Do you want to
just want to say first-time visitors is huge. How often are you getting? And when I say first-time visitors, the way I count it is households. Because your household may have 6 people. Oh, we had 6 visitors. Was that 1 household or 3 households or 6 households? So how many households do you see? Then returning visitors.
Returning is huge. Right, yeah, exactly.
If they don't come back, you can't grow your church. That's just how it is. But if you don't know that they're not coming back, and here's something that's really important, is that often churches will tell me, I'll say to the churches, no church is as friendly as it thinks it is. And they said, we've had visitors who stayed, and they continue to tell us how wonderful and welcoming we were. And those are conversations you've had with people who stayed.
Yeah.
What you didn't have is conversation with those who didn't stay. How many didn't stay compared to how many did stay?
Yeah, we don't tend to look at that, right? I mean, churches don't tend to look at that.
Right, yeah. So we're very welcoming.
Yeah.
And it turns out
that.
the national average only keeps 15% of first-time visitors. I mean, 85% say, no, we're not coming back.
Right.
If you're only keeping 15%, that's probably saying something about the friendliness of your church. Even if those 15% who stay go, whoa, you're wonderful, it means they connected, but apparently 85% didn't.
So let's get into that attendance piece, okay? So we've mentioned average worship attendance, but I guess it's members, how many members you have and how many participating members you have. I remember when we went to Yates Center, that was our first churches after, our full-time churches after seminary. And when I was looking at the profile. So for those of us that are in call systems for ministers, churches have ministerial profiles, and it has all this information
about the
congregation,
right.
Yeah, in church setting, and it always includes membership,
right.
Members.
Right.
At that time, at least, it was members, and there were like 400, 500, 600 people on the rolls. I'm like, this is a large church. So what we found when we got there was a worship attendance of 99 on a good Sunday. And we started to ask, well, just how many of those members show up? And they almost laughed. They said, we think some of them are dead. And when we went to clean out the rolls, there were people that had been born in the late 1800s. They're still on the rolls. I said, do you think we can take them off? Like, they've got to be dead by now. I don't know. We can't really take people off. I mean, our churches don't even have mechanisms for taking people off of the rolls, and I can help you with that. So just let us know if you need help cleaning up your church rolls. Anyways, so that's your your membership. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count.
Right. Membership's an artificial number.
The question then is, what's your participating membership? You can bring in all kinds of folks, but if you haven't gotten them into the life of the church and they're not serving in some way,
or at least attending in some way.
All you've got are Christians, and you don't really have discipleship.
You have believers.
In the making.
You have believers. What you really
Christians.
have is members. You've got church members. But they're not necessarily, they're certainly not disciples, and maybe not even Christians.
Sure. So how do you measure, I just cut you off completely.
That's all right, go ahead.
Okay, good. How do you measure participating membership? If everybody was at church on Sunday, what would it be? What's your number there?
How many people? Because the national average is people come between 1 once to twice per month. That's what's considered
Yeah.
regular attendance. It doesn't work for me, but
Right,
it is
and
what
you
it is.
said nationally, and
Right.
I want to add that you may live in a community where you're seeing people every 3 times a month or
Right.
or whatever. Just it works wherever it is. But overall, in different places, we used to hear it once every 2 weeks, and then in some places I've been
One
once
out of
every
4,
3 weeks.
right.
Now, yeah, one every 4.
All
Okay,
right, so
there we go.
Let's
ahead.
just go from tick off of some tick off, not ticked off, but a tick of. Let me just share some of the numbers that are important.
Yeah.
How many people are reading their Bible on a weekly basis?
Yep.
How many people are praying on a daily basis? How many people are sharing their faith? How many people are inviting other people? How many people? These are all discipleship numbers. How many people are attending a small group?
That's it.
How many people are in Sunday school? Now,
Right.
that one is one we used to track on a regular basis, not so much anymore. And so these are matrices that let you know how spiritually mature
Or
your
growing.
growing
Right.
that your congregation is. And again, you have to. This is a number. You take a benchmark. What are we doing this year? What are we
Right.
doing next year? Do we have more people reading their Bible next year than we did last year?
Right.
Then great. And we're on a roll. How do we
That's
keep
right.
that up? That's why you measure all this. And you can't measure spiritual maturity, but you kind of can.
Yeah.
Based on their behaviors.
Right. So and again, you've got pieces, we've got pieces through Effective Church, and I've got a matrix that I've used now for a number of years. And you can test spiritual growth by, again, per capita, if you will, the average number of people that are attending a small group, that are enrolled in a small group or a class that is for discipleship, not just any old Sunday school class or biblical knowledge, but so in your discipleship ministry, whatever that may look like. So, how many people are serving? Do you have more people serving in and beyond the church?
In the church or beyond the church?
Beyond the
Which
church.
one? Where do you have the most people working? Are they working in the community, touching lives out there, or is it all I'm a bulletin hander outer and I'm a greeter and I make the coffee and this is all the Christian stuff I do out here. So finding out where these matrices are, how are people serving, etc., is key.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you want to include this one, but I use it as a number, and that's favor in the community.
Oh yeah, right.
Right.
And it really is a number, but it
you can put it. Well, I put it into numbers.
Okay, so share
here's
that.
what
It's
it
about
is.
your reputation,
right? And so it's easy, if you will, to track. Well, and this is easy to track, but it's easy to get your baseline now based on, the numbers you have, and you can look in your years past. You've got a lot of that already there. Some you've got to start, but start to count your favor in the community. So what that means is you go out, you knock on the doors around the church, or you have members around their neighborhood, just their street, and you ask, hey, have you heard about that church up there? Or what do you know about that church up there?
Give it a name. I mean, First Church
Right,
or
you have
whatever.
to, and you have to be specific because you want it for your church specifically.
And do they know about it at all? I've never heard of it.
Do they know about it at all? At all? Do they have good words to say about it? Do they have bad words to say about it? What have they heard, if not known directly? You want to be able to do it. You don't want to tell them that you're a member of the church. You're just out there. You don't want to lie either. But it's, hey, I'm trying to get more information on that church up the street. What can you tell me about that? And then what you do is you write down the good things and you write down the negative things and you write down don't know. And you're going to come back and you'll put, and you'll count that. How many positive words did you hear? How many negative? How many of the whats? Yeah, who's? That's even better. And then, so now you've got your baseline. And the next year you do that, and the next year you do that. And hopefully what you're seeing is less negative. And you may go out there and you may not hear any negative. Yahoo, if that's the case. You may not hear anything negative, but you might just hear a bit of positive. You want to get more and more.
And the reality is most churches have no reputation in the community. They think, oh, we're known for this or we're known for that.
Right.
And when you actually go out there and ask people, that the only ones, by and large, are the people who know, are the people who attend the church or those who are being served by the church. And that's a pretty limited number in most cases. Okay,
All right,
we got to wrap this up.
We
and
do.
I just want to say that there's some urgency in all this, okay? The bottom line is in our modern church today, there's a whole lot of churches that have really become complacent and have said, we're not counting. It's not a spiritual practice. It's, we don't want to know. It really is almost like la, 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 la. These aren't statistics.
Right.
These are people. And if churches aren't counting, it's likely they're not reaching as many people as they could be. I just want to wrap this up by saying in the book of Revelation, the church, there's 7 churches that are addressed. Now, they don't talk numbers, not really, in those 7 churches. But it's pretty clear that they weren't doing what they needed to do, most of them. That they had work to do in the community, work to do within their community, work to do outside, and they weren't doing it. And the numbers allow us to be honest with what we're doing and what we're not. You don't have to share them outside of your congregation. You don't have to share them with your congregation, although you probably ought to.
Oh, yeah.
But getting those numbers and holding your congregation accountable to let them know, hey, we're doing what we need to do, or hey, here's some areas we need some work. That is incredibly important.
Not just your congregation, though, holding yourself accountable.
Well, yeah, of course,
right?
yeah.
I know. Well, but we need to say that because there are a lot of people in leadership that blame the congregation. And just remember, as goes the leader, so goes the congregation, y'all. Not just the pastor,
right,
but the leadership, right? Yeah. It struck me, I know we have to go, but it did strike me that some of the churches that I talked to and I've worked with, they can tell me, a lot of them, maybe all of them, can tell me what their church attendance was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, but they can't tell me what it was
last Sunday.
Last Sunday,
Yep.
yeah.
Hey, numbers count, and they count because it tells us and gives us an indication of where we're succeeding, and we need to put more energy there, or where we're not doing so well, and we need to work on those areas.
Or tweak.
Or tweak them, all right? Hey, again, get the workbook, the numbers you need is down below in the description. Grab it, it's free, and I hope that it'll help you. Hey, we got to go. We are out of time. See you next week.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.